Sorry if you can't get through at the moment about the political turmoil at Westminster. We will be continuing to discuss that in the next hour. But let's look at related stories. And the government has said it will press ahead with legal moves to introduce minimum service levels during strikes by transport workers. This follows months of industrial action by railway workers in disputes over pay, jobs and conditions, which has caused travel chaos across the country. And of course, it's worth saying it is due to continue indeed into next month and perhaps beyond. Details now then from Transport Secretary and Conservative MP Anne-Marie Trevelyan, who joins me now. How exactly will these service levels be maintained then, Secretary of State? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Yes, we're bringing in legislation today which will set out a framework for transport operators and the unions who they work with to agree minimum service agreements. In doing that, they will agree that should there be strikes, they will commit to providing a minimum service level continue. So what we've seen in the last few months, as you say, we've been under the pressure of rolling strikes on a number of our transport networks, is that whilst we might see indeed minimum service levels on the mainline trains, for instance, many of these smaller lines, the ones that are incredibly important for people, nurses to get to their hospital to do a shift, children to get to school or education, business people to get to meet those they need for business purposes, those smaller lines closed means that there's massive disruption to the economy. And of course, what we are trying to do in everything that we do is focus on growth and provide the tools for our amazing citizens to do what they do to help our economy to grow. So we'll be bringing this in today, and then there will be consultation for each of the different modes of transport, because obviously, trains, buses, ports, they all have their own different areas. We'll be working with all of those industries and unions for them to bring these in so that we can ensure that we can all get on with our day-to-day lives.
What percentage of service would the government seek to maintain on railways?
So for each, as I say, of each of the different modes, we'll be consulting very closely once this.
What would you hope to be? 20%, 10%, 25%?
So if you look at the mainline trains, for instance, in the recent strikes, they were running about a 20% minimum service level, and people, it was very limited, but people were together. But of course, on those smaller lines where there was nothing, that would not be acceptable.
But hold on.
So we will look at each in more detail to ensure that we set what is fair and reasonable minimum service level.
But if 100% of potential passengers want to use the service and there's only 20% of trains, the numbers aren't going to work, are they, Secretary of State?
So
where will those people go?
So these are agreements to be used in time of strike. Clearly, what we want is to get to a negotiated settlement with the unions on our transport with our transport employers so that they are not striking. And of course, those negotiations are in place. And I continue to urge all parties to continue to discuss around the table how they can find a good settlement. There is money on the table. Obviously, I have limited funds. We are at a time when we need to support everyone. And the energy price guarantee has assured not only rail workers, energy costs, which are the big spike in our bills, but also everyone else's.
But to my point, if you and your colleagues, or if whoever the people who are trying to sort out the pay, if they were unsuccessful and we had to rely on a 20% service for one particular railway line and 100% of passengers turned up, it's not going to work. You haven't got enough service.
Well, no, that's right. But this is in a time of strike. What we are doing is bringing in a minimum service so that they cannot shut down a mode of transport. The unions will not be able to shut it down. There will be this agreement. And if they can't reach agreement between them, then we will use the arbitration service to bring in a determining position. So we want them to work together to bring these agreements in between themselves.
And do the unions have to agree with this plan, this latest legislation that will be being discussed today? Do the unions have to sign off on that?
Well, so this is government legislation that we're bringing in, and we will see whether indeed the Labour Party wishes to support it, whether they believe
by
that...
the Labour Party. Do the unions have to... Are you going to force a man or woman to work on the trains when they don't want to? This is what I'm trying to find out. Or will it be managers who do the jobs?
So this will be working at a managerial level. The agreement set in place will mean that the unions and the employers will work together to ensure they can roster a whatever, let's say 20% minimum service level is. That will be agreed between them. If they cannot agree a minimum service agreement between them at a point when a strike kicks off, then there will be the opportunity and indeed the requirement for the arbitration service to set that in place, and that will then force
Sorry, just to
a minimum
clarify,
service.
you think you'll be able to force a man or woman to drive a train if they don't want to?
No, the point
Well, who's
is
going to
that
drive
we want...
the train? If the unions don't agree with this, and you have managers who obviously are not in the union, but they're not skilled to drive a train. Who's going to drive the train?
Well, so not everyone is in a union. There are many unions who would be willing to work. This is the idea of this legislation will be to ensure that people can create a minimum service agreement between themselves, so that should these strikes kick off, they will have agreed that they will provide a minimum number of workforce.
All right. As we're talking about who's in charge of the clattering train, as it were, Secretary of State, to those who say this is a government now that's out of ideas, it's running out of personnel, it really should be out of office, how would you respond?
I would disagree. We're certainly not out of ideas, and we are in office because we were elected, and our Prime Minister is leading us to deliver some really important programme of policies to help with growth, because we can only support and fund our amazing public services and help the economy to grow and indeed sustain through these difficult global economic times by doing that. So I've got a really important role in our transport projects that we're trying to deliver, so that we can invest in our roads and other transport projects to help growth, to help us decarbonise, to help our local and regional businesses to maximise their potential. So we have some really exciting policies that we are pushing forwards with to help that growth plan.
In the space of just one day yesterday, we saw inflation be announced at north of 10%. We saw the Prime Minister have a very tough time with her opponent at Prime Minister's Questions. She then went on to lose her Home Secretary, and then it is reported have a hell of a battle to try and keep her Chief Whip, and allegations that some of your colleagues were virtually bundled through the voting lobby. Why should we have any confidence in the Conservatives?
So we are delivering an important package of works, providing the stability we are going to see in the next given time to do so. Jeremy Hunt is the new Chancellor, bringing in...
He's the Chancellor for October, isn't he?
Full package at the end of the month. As I say, at the end of the month, so we want to give them the space to do that, so that we can all continue as cabinet ministers with departmental responsibilities, the important public services that are critically important to our constituents, and ensuring that we both work to tackle what are, you're right, really difficult global headwinds around inflation, not only here, across the world.
Why is the United Kingdom's inflation rate so high?
So the inflation rate is high because of mostly the energy price spike, and indeed that's why the Prime Minister, as she came into office, was absolutely clear. The most important and urgent thing she did was bring in the energy price guarantee to ensure that... Are you aware
what it is when we look at our nearest neighbours, their inflation rates? Do you know their figures?
So I haven't seen the latest ones. Obviously, ours came out yesterday, but they are all sitting in, the
no, they're not.
8, 9, 10. What we're seeing also importantly is in
State, France is 5.6.
Yeah, well,
so
and that's an interesting question.
Neighbour.
Yes, but that's in part because they have much greater control over their energy source in terms of their nearly 70% nuclear domestically produced energy. One of the things that, alongside the energy price guarantee, is that we're continuing to drive forwards a movement towards much more security of our energy supply, so that we are not caught in the headwinds of international prices.
United States 8.2, Britain out there, United Kingdom 10.1. It's shameful, isn't it?
So it is a reflection of those energy prices, and the energy price guarantee will, of course, see inflation come down in the months ahead, because probably 5 percentage points.
There's one rather serious allegation we need to look at here. Can you assure me that none of your colleagues were manhandled or bullied through the voting lobbies yesterday, as has been suggested by some Labour MPs?
So I voted early because I had some security issues that I was managing in the department. So I wasn't there to see these alleged scenes, but I know that Mr. Speaker will be looking very closely at that. It is never acceptable to try and direct a colleague like that if that is what went on. And I know that Mr. Speaker did that. We are respected as one of the great parliaments of the world because we have genuine freedom to vote as our conscience determines. It was a 3-line whip yesterday because it was an opposition day motion, and Labour were trying to hijack the legislative timetable. So we clearly wanted to make sure that could not happen, and that is the right thing to do. And what's important is that for those who weren't, who didn't vote, and that's always the case, and I think there's a bit of a storm here that suggests that doesn't happen. So there can be constituency reasons, there can be health reasons, that I know that the business managers will today sit down with all of those who weren't able to vote with the government to understand why, and we need to give them the space to do that, because there may be personal reasons for which general discussion in the media is not helpful.
Just to clarify, there could be disciplinary action for Kwasi Kwarteng, Nadine Dorries, Theresa May. Liz Truss didn't even vote, Secretary of State.
So it's quite often the case that a number of people don't vote because they are paired with colleagues from the other side, and the Prime Minister is often one of those.
All right. Can we talk a little bit, lastly, I've only got you for another minute or so, do we have a U-turn, appropriate enough, on the issue of smart motorways concerning the Prime Minister's pledge to scrap them, which she actually told me? Is that now going to be a U-turned?
So exactly that. What we've done, and in fact it was my predecessor, the now Home Secretary, who brought in, was a pause across the piece to make sure that we can start to gather enough information to assess exactly where the dangers are. But there is work ongoing, if you like, remedial works to add in more emergency areas on the existing smart motorways. I'm not going to stop that work. I want to make sure that they are as secure and safe as they can be. So that work is ongoing, but we have paused, and there will be no more investment in smart motorways at this point. And I think the Prime Minister was very clear.
And you were asked yesterday, I'll ask the same question, do you consider that they're smart?
So SMART, and I can't remember the acronym, but it is all about the way it's a constant monitoring of the roads. If you've driven on them, as I do on a regular basis, travelling up and down the country, they are largely about managing the flows of traffic, so they can see further ahead where there's traffic jam, and they slow you and I down beforehand to try and reduce bottlenecks, and indeed also to improve air pollution levels. So these are designed for that purpose, but we have seen some appalling safety cases, and that's why we've put a pause on it, so that we can understand more fully exactly what the data tells us about it. And in the meantime, we will only secure and make safer those that need more emergency areas.
Well, I'm grateful you referenced that, because you'll be aware that a number of coroners have actually cited these motorways in instances
indeed.
of very sad deaths of people in cases they've had to sit. So that is something you must surely take on board.
Well, exactly right, which is why they're on pause. But I am continuing the work to add in extra emergency areas on those roads that are in that situation now, to continue to reduce those risks, as coroners have pointed out.
Just the last couple of questions. What makes you think SMART is an acronym? I've never heard that before. Maybe...
Oh, it is. No, I will send it to you, Nick. I can't remember what it stands for, but it is an acronym of the technologies that are used.
Okay. Lastly, how long has Liz Truss got? Will she be Prime Minister on Monday?
Yes.
Will she be Prime Minister for the next general election?
I think that's going to be the case. We want to get to 2024. We have a big agenda to deliver. We want to make sure that we provide the energy price guarantee through. Labour haven't got a proper plan. There's nothing there. They're not proposing to suggest how they balance their books. We want to make sure that as the party of government we deliver that.
I think your attacking Labour is a little rich even at this time, but I'm grateful for your time. Thank you, Transport Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan, appearing here on LBC. We're at 2 minutes after 8. The news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This